You're at 109 right now.
So the title of my documentary is going to be the man who believes Nipsey was Jesus. And then it's going to start with me talking sort of like this, talking with an interviewer, and the interviewer is going to say, so the first question will be, so you think Nipsey was Jesus? And then I'm going to be like, no, I don't believe Nipsey was Jesus. And then the interviewer is going to be like, wait a minute, but that's what this whole documentary is about. You're the guy who thinks Nipsey was Jesus. And then I'm going to have to like clarify in that moment, say, look, what I mean is, first off, Jesus was a black man. And Jesus was the greatest black man, or at least I imagine Jesus was great for his time, for his lifetime. And basically he led a revolution against the oppressive Roman, power structure, for which he was eventually crucified. He was killed for. So after making that statement, then I want to make it clear that, as sort of a parallel to history, that Nipsey during his lifetime was like Jesus, because he stood up for his people, and basically he was crucified for his success. So, and Nipsey was a black man. I really want to drive home the fact that Nipsey was a black man who basically achieved so much in his lifetime that the only way to explain his success, other than simply hard work, would be to say that he was Jesus. But not Jesus. Like, let me not confuse my audience. I have to very much, state this. I have to be adamant about it. I don't believe Nipsey was Jesus per se, but I think from a historical perspective that I imagine Jesus was like Nipsey. And not only that, or rather Nipsey was like Jesus, and not only that, but I don't know, I have to oh, now I remember what I wanted to say. I would say that, for all that we hear about Jesus, all that we study about his life, and all that we know about what he did, I would say that many of the stories were written long after Jesus passed. And the point being that so much of what we believe he did, he probably didn't do because he was a mortal man, a real person. But over the years, the stories have been embellished and developed hundreds of years, so that when we think of Jesus, we think of the Almighty. We think of this greater, grander than life, figure. Whereas the reality was he was just a regular human being who just had the right values and had the right perspective. and dared to challenge his oppressors. And if you listen to Nipsey's music, it's like, yeah, everything is there. Nipsey communicated his message, or rather communicated the message of his people, to the world. And the one thing that's baffling about Nipsey's success for me personally is that he didn't graduate from high school, he didn't go to college, and yet he understood so much. And he was able to do many things. When he died at the age of 33, which is the same age as Jesus, right? He had lived so much. He had climbed to the mountaintop, and he had peered over the mountaintop and seen and saw the lay of the land, and he said, yes, I get it, I got it. And when he came back down, and he said, all right, this is what it is. So yeah, he didn't graduate from high school, didn't graduate from college, and yet he did so many things. And I think it boiled down to having a belief in himself. Yes, he got caught up in jail. He ended up in jail, and I think he took great risks. Real risks. I remember the story that they were telling about, Nipsey and the Slauson boys, his team, selling weed on Slauson. And even before they had these legal dispensaries, Nipsey had his dispensary, and that was a huge risk. I know personally that whenever I saw rappers who smoked, these were celebrities, Redman, Method Man, Snoop Dogg. These guys were taking huge risks at a time when it wasn't legal, when it wasn't kosher, it wasn't cool. Snoop got caught up a few times, but it was, it was the reality. And Cypress Hill. These guys did things way before the rest of us caught on to it. So yeah, huge risks. But he was well read. Nipsey was well read. He was a planner. He was well read. Yep. Success. A very successful, human being. Now, the part that I want to share through the course of my documentary is I want to tell people that the reason why I would equate Nipsey to Jesus. Yes, Nipsey did a lot in his lifetime, and I would say it's remarkable. It's miraculous. I would say that. But there are a lot of miraculous things that happen to people throughout their lifetimes. Jay-Z is a miracle, his life. And Jay-Z does call himself, Jehovah, the God, he has his own biblical references and whatnot. But the particular reason why I stick to Nipsey's story is because when I was in the desert, and the desert is the setting for many a biblical story, I was in the desert one morning, the same morning that I received news of Nipsey's passing. I was driving to work. A car cut me off on a road in the desert. There were only 2 cars on the road. And surprise, surprise, the license plate on that car started with the numbers 10 and 9. Now that occurred in 2019, and since 2007, I've had recurring moments when I've encountered the numbers 109 or 109 under very peculiar circumstances, such as in this case. I'm driving down the street. The roads are empty except for me, my car, and this other truck. The truck cuts me off, and there it is. The number 109 is on the license plate. If the roads were littered with cars and license plates, maybe you could look and try to find one car with 109 on it, and even still, it could be difficult to find them. But for that moment, to find that license plate was 109 on the back of that truck, I mean, that was miraculous to me. And so on the day that Nipsey was murdered, and I had that moment where that car cut me off and I saw 109 back there, then, 109 and Nipsey are forever associated. They're forever linked for me. And then if you're walking down the street in Los Angeles on Crenshaw Boulevard, where at the Crete Academy, there's a mural of Nipsey's head, his face, a portrait, not a portrait, but a profile view of Nipsey's face on the basketball court, on the ground, on the playground. Where that is located, just next door to it, there is an apartment building with the address 6109, immediately adjacent to the academy. Excuse me. But not only that, but in between Nipsey's mural and the apartment, on the campus, there is a church or a chapel with a cross on it. So there's Nipsey, there's a church, and then immediately adjacent to the school, the church is on the school campus, is apartment 6109. So once again, right here in Los Angeles, 109 and Nipsey are linked, are associated for me, because I've driven down the street and I saw that and I said, wow, there's 109 again, and it's right next to Nipsey. It's not 2, 3, 4 blocks away. It's not across the street. It's on the same side of the street, and it's right next to the school where Nipsey's mural is on the playground. It's right next to the playground where Nipsey's image is. That's very close. That's extremely close. And just like I was in the desert, and on the day that I learned of Nipsey's murder, I saw 109. I mean, that's as close as it gets. And so the other thing is, I was in Sweden. I was at the museum, went to the gift shop, and I talked with a young Eritrean woman, and I asked her what Nipsey meant to her, and she said Nipsey meant hope and Nipsey meant success for Eritreans in America. And just after I had that conversation about Nipsey, the tour began, and as the tour guide is speaking, I can clearly see, just over her shoulder, right behind her, I can clearly see the numbers 10 and 9 on a document that was written in 1934. So there it is again. Nipsey and 109 were once again associated, were linked for me. So I'm just like bugging. Like, for one, I'm already bugging because I'm like, how do I keep finding this number 109? Like, I was in Ethiopia and I was on the second floor of the museum and I was walking to the bathroom, and the number 109 I noticed was on the door next to the bathroom. It wasn't supposed to be there. It was written on that door. How does that happen? And then I was watching a Basquiat documentary, and it was 11:09 when a painting came across the screen on the television that showed a painting that Jean-Michel Basquiat had painted in which he wrote 109 on that painting. And I discovered that while watching the documentary at 11:09 p.m. How does this happen? So for every moment that's linked between Nipsey and 109, and for all of the moments where I've encountered 109 under these peculiar, mysterious, circumstances, I just I've had my idea confirmed by, what I've experienced. Since 2007 until 2019, when Nipsey passed, it was these were just moments of me saying, "Oh, that's my birthday. That's my birthday. 10/9, 10/9, 109. That's my birthday." But until Nipsey was murdered, nothing. All of these experiences, I guess, coalesced. They came together, and then there was an overriding theme, or an overriding ideal that came to the forefront of my mind, and it said that these 109 instances are not isolated instances, but they are connected. These are callings, spiritual callings, saying to you, you must follow this path. You must work to spread a message, to interpret things. So I was just like, I got it. I got the message. I understand what I have to do, because so many ideas came to me, and that's what led me to. It led me to write my book. I knew I was going to write a book, but I didn't have a way of bringing all of these isolated incidents or moments with 109 together. I didn't know until Nipsey passed. And then the capstone, to really bring it all together, to really solidify it for me. Sure, I saw 109 on the day that Nipsey was murdered, but it was 7 days after Nipsey was murdered that I saw, that I walked outside of my home in Oman in the desert, and I saw something that I can't explain. I literally can't explain why there was a crucifix in the sky. There were two perpendicular lines, and the only explanation I could give for those lines being up there, is and was that airplanes created those lines. They were so perfect. They were perpendicular. They looked like they were just clean lines, and I didn't think that naturally the air could make such perfectly delineated lines. I didn't think that was, possible. And then for it to be exactly 7 days after Nipsey was murdered, it seemed to be very like a choice time, because 7 is the number of completion. So I of course I did some research to learn that, but when I learned it, I said, oh, okay, so that means don't grieve for Nipsey. He completed his mission on Earth, right? But the fact that I saw that in the sky, and I knew that there weren't airplanes flying overhead regularly to produce lines, whether they were just lines in the sky, period, or lines on that particular day, airplanes didn't fly overhead. So I simply ruled out the possibility that airplanes could have created what I saw. So all of my experiences from 2007 into 2019 in particular, but I still have these isolated incidents where 109 seems to be calling me. For instance, last week we got the news that Nipsey's murderer was sentenced to 60 years in prison. On that same day, I happened to wake up at 1:09 a.m. for some strange reason. But again, the fact that I woke up at 1:09 a.m. on that day, on the same day that news was released, when I didn't expect that news to be released, that is another one of those connections with Nipsey. Like there's Nipsey or news about Nipsey, and there's 109. There it is together. That's my story, y'all. That's what this is about. I want to be able to show in my documentary, I want to be able to explain these moments when I encountered 109, and I want to be able to draw the conclusion. Well, not the conclusions, but just I want to show how um, how many times this has actually happened. I haven't talked about all of the times I've seen 109 under very peculiar circumstances, you know, but that's what it is. That's my story. So thank you for listening. Peace and blessings, you know. There's so much to this. There's so much. There's really a lot that needs to be documented. I'm out.